moving along the coastline. And an example that we'll talk about in a moment of a short-term environmental change is migration, which is something that occurs seasonally, usually. So we'll talk about that in a moment. All right. So short-term changes. We're going to first look at daily changes. Okay. So our natural environment changes a lot during a day, okay, or between day to day. So that's what we're going to look at first. The first thing, obviously, is it gets dark. Okay, so there's nighttime and daytime, and there's many biological changes that occur within this 24-hour pattern, and they're called circadian rhythms. So that's any change that occurs within regularly and predictable during 24-hour cycle. Okay? Some of these include being diurnal. Now, humans are diurnal, most of us. Okay? That's when we're active during the day and inactive at night when we're sleeping. It makes sense for most animals on Earth to be like that because we're adapted to be able to see, and it's easier to see and do things when it's light, and when it's dark, that makes it easier to sleep. Okay? So that's how we're adapted, and many animals are adapted the same way. However, in Australia, we've obviously got lots of native animals which don't follow this pattern. So nocturnal species like pesky possums who run over your tin roof all through the night. Okay? They're nocturnal. They're up at night. They're active, and you don't see them during the day. Okay? Possum's main predator before feral cats and foxes were around would have been eagles. Okay? And eagles rely an amazingly amount on sight. Eagles need to see things before they can decide where to swoop and land. So if you're a possum, it makes sense to be nocturnal, and that's why they've evolved this pattern. Animals that are active at dusk and dawn, like kangaroos, are called crepuscular. They follow a crepuscular pattern, so they're active in the dusk and the dawn, and they kind of sleep during the hottest part of the day, and they also sleep at night time. So obviously, there's a lot of animals, and often, unfortunately, that happens. These animals, I guess, become a bit more roadkill than other animals because they are active at that time where the roads are still busy, but it's also getting difficult to see. So often crepuscular animals can be affected by roadkill a little bit more. Okay, so these are some of the daily circadian rhythms that we that we are familiar with. If you can think of some others, jot them down and bring them to the next class. There are plenty of them around. This is just one. So lunar rhythms are an example of monthly changes. So we've now gone from daily to monthly changes. So lunar rhythms are associated with the movement of the moon around the Earth, and this happens, and it takes 28 to 29 days. So this 28-day cycle affects quite a few living things. So tidal rhythms. Once a month, there's really high tides, and once a month, there's tides with not much change in them at all. So the tidal rhythm, the heights of the tides vary in this 28-day cycle. And many marine organisms follow these rhythms. So there's a few examples here. The one on the page here is the common Galaxias, which is a small migratory fish. And it lives in fresh water as an adult, and the breeding coincides with extreme high tides or at the new moon or full moon. Okay, so yeah, its breeding coincides with that with the moon, and there's many other things that do this. So one of them is eels in estuaries. Their breeding again is on those extreme high tides because what they do is they have to often cross a sand barrier between the estuary and the ocean to try try and breed in the ocean. So they'll wait for those extreme high tides. So I'm thinking of some places like Lake Tyers, where it's often closed to the ocean. That would be an occurrence there. One other one is coral spawning. So if you want to come back and click on this link and go to this YouTube video, you can just YouTube coral spawning on the full moon. Many animals wait till either the new moon or the full moon to release their spores. And the reason that they do this is because if the species can time it, so all spores and eggs and sperm are all released at once, then there's a greater chance of fertilization. So there's some amazing videos of these coral reefs that every bit of coral is just releasing these spores. It's quite amazing. So this is a change that's occurring on a monthly basis. And again, just bringing this back to I guess environmental management. If you went to a coral reef not during the spawning time, not during the full moon, you might survey a coral reef for a whole week and you wouldn't see a coral species releasing a spore at all, and you might think, oh, these coral species aren't reproducing. They're not healthy because they're not reproducing, but that's because you don't understand the monthly changes that are occurring. Okay, so to understand whether a coral species is healthy or not, you need to know when to look for the spawning and when to see if this is occurring or not. So there's just a quick example of why this might be important in environmental